Body of a missing 26-year-old woman has been found. It was discovered inside a suitcase along the Saw Mill River Parkway in Yonkers. Eyewitness News reporter Stefan Kim live at the victim's home in the Fordham Heights section of the Bronx with this disturbing story. Stefan.
Well, Bill, her family had been frantically trying to locate her for days, and sadly, that search is now over. Of course, this is not the way her family had hoped this search would end. Outside her home here in the Bronx, there is a small candlelight vigil. Upstairs, the NYPD has the unit sealed off. They are waiting for a warrant to enter. Law enforcement sources confirm the body of 26-year-old Pamela Alcantara was found at the Bronx-Yonkers border in a red suitcase today by the Saw Mill River Parkway. It's unclear at this time who found the body. She was reported missing on Sunday.
The morning of March 6, 2025, began like any other along the Saw Mill River Parkway in Yonkers. Commuters rushed past, unaware that just feet away from their daily drive, something waited to be found. At 9:47 a.m., a highway maintenance worker noticed an unusual object near the creek that runs parallel to the roadway. A red suitcase, partially concealed among the brush. What made this worker pause wasn't just the oddity of abandoned luggage in such a location. It was the size, the positioning, and a gut feeling that something wasn't right. When he approached and saw that the zipper was partially open, he immediately called the police. Within minutes, patrol cars lined the shoulder of the parkway. Officers secured a perimeter as they approached the suitcase. What they discovered would launch a homicide investigation that moved with remarkable speed, culminating in an arrest just 24 hours later. Inside that red suitcase was a young woman. Her life, her dreams, her future, all ended and reduced to a discarded piece of luggage along a busy New York highway. The location wasn't random. It was calculated to delay discovery while allowing for quick disposal. The method wasn't impulsive. It showed planning and a cold determination to conceal evidence. This discovery would reveal not just a murder, but a story about the dangers faced by those attempting to leave toxic relationships. It would expose how the most dangerous moment in an abusive relationship often comes when someone tries to break free. Before I tell you who was in that suitcase and how investigators tracked down her killer in less than a day, take a moment to consider. Have you ever heard about a case that started with such a disturbing discovery? Let me know in the comments below. The story of the red suitcase is also the story of Pamela Alcantara, a woman whose compassion for others made her beloved in her community, but couldn't save her from the danger closest to home. Welcome to the Dark Trace Crime Stories. Whether you're returning or joining us for the first time, we're glad you're here. If you find value in stories that shine a light on justice and the lives behind the headlines, please consider supporting the channel by subscribing, liking this video, and sharing it with others.
Dios te bendiga y Dios te guarde. Te habla tu hermana Pamela y este video es para invitarte a una gran fiesta. Estaremos celebrando nuestro 4º aniversario, gracias al Señor. Y esto será este domingo 14 a las 3 de la tarde en el 4333 de White Plains, Bronx, New York, con nuestros pastores Roberto y Bielka López en la iglesia Dios en medio de la familia. No te lo puedes perder, te aseguro que hay una palabra de poder para ti. Dios hablará tu vida y no saldrás como entraste, te lo aseguro. Y hay también una profeta del Señor que Dios usa con poder, aleluya, gracias a la misericordia del Señor. No te lo pierdas, que Dios te bendiga y Dios te guarde.
Pamela Alcantara was known for her extraordinary kindness. At just 26 years old, the Bronx resident had already built a reputation as someone who consistently put others first. Born to a family with deep roots in the Dominican Republic, Pamela carried her cultural heritage proudly. Her mother, Sunilda Ribiera, raised her with strong values centered around family, faith, and community service. These weren't just abstract concepts to Pamela. They were principles she lived by every day. Those who knew her describe a young woman whose empathy seemed boundless. Weekends often found her volunteering at local hospitals, sitting with patients who had few visitors, bringing small comforts and conversation to brighten their days. Her evenings were frequently spent at shelters supporting survivors of domestic violence, a cause that held special meaning for her. She could walk into a room and immediately sense who needed help, recalled one friend. Then she would quietly find ways to provide it without making anyone feel like a charity case. The Bronx neighborhood where Pamela grew up shaped her worldview. In this vibrant, diverse community, she witnessed both struggle and resilience. Rather than becoming hardened by the challenges around her, she developed a profound commitment to making things better. Her relationship with her mother was particularly close. They spoke daily, sharing everything from mundane details to major life decisions. Pamela also had a younger sister who had moved back to the Dominican Republic. The distance between them was a source of sadness, but they maintained their bond through regular video calls and messages. Faith played a central role in Pamela's life. She was active in her church community, participating in services and outreach programs. It was after one such church event that she would disappear, a cruel irony for someone whose faith had always been a source of strength and guidance. What makes Pamela's story particularly poignant is that she spent so much time helping women escape dangerous situations, only to become trapped in one herself. The shelter where she volunteered had likely seen cases similar to what would ultimately happen to her. Women trying to leave relationships that had turned controlling or abusive. Those who worked alongside her at the shelter remember her patience and non-judgmental approach. She never questioned why someone stayed too long, said a fellow volunteer. She understood how complicated these situations can be, how fear and hope get tangled together. Pamela was working toward a better future. She had plans to expand her education, to perhaps formalize her helping role through social work or counseling. She wanted to create a more structured program for the women she assisted, something that would provide not just immediate safety, but long-term stability. These dreams would remain unfulfilled, cut short by the very type of violence she had dedicated herself to fighting against. Pamela's relationship with Junior Perez Diaz began like many others, with promise and possibility. At 46, Perez Diaz was significantly older than 26-year-old Pamela, but age gaps aren't uncommon in relationships. What started as companionship eventually led to them sharing an apartment in the Bronx. From the outside, few could see the dynamics developing behind closed doors. Friends noticed subtle changes in Pamela's behavior. She became less available for spontaneous gatherings, checked her phone more frequently when out, and sometimes seemed distracted during conversations. These small shifts, barely perceptible at first, are often the early warning signs of controlling behavior. By early 2025, Pamela had made the decision to leave. She confided in her mother that the relationship had become unhealthy, though the full extent of what she was experiencing remains known only to her. What we do know is that she was actively planning her exit, looking for a new place to live and preparing to move her belongings. She told me she wanted a fresh start, her mother later told reporters. She seemed hopeful about the future, making plans for after she moved out. In the weeks before her disappearance, Pamela had been methodically preparing for her departure. She sorted through possessions, deciding what to take and what to leave behind. She researched new apartments in different neighborhoods. She confided in trusted friends about her plans, seeking emotional support during this transition. What she couldn't have known was how Perez Diaz would respond to her decision. Did he discover her plans accidentally, or did she tell him directly? Did he initially accept her decision before changing his mind? These questions may never be fully answered. What we do know is that by Sunday, March 2nd, 2025, Pamela was actively in the process of moving out. She had attended a church service that morning, perhaps drawing strength from her faith community for the changes ahead. She spoke with her mother by phone afterward, mentioning plans to attend another church gathering in Connecticut later that day. That phone call would be the last time anyone heard from Pamela Alcantara. The timeline suggests that something happened when she returned to the apartment she shared with Perez Diaz. Perhaps a confrontation about her plans to leave. Perhaps a final attempt to assert control over her decisions. Whatever occurred in those critical moments would set in motion the events that led to the discovery of the red suitcase 4 days later. Sunday, March 2nd, 2025, began as a day of worship and community for Pamela Alcantara. She rose early, dressed in her church clothes, and headed to a morning service in her Bronx neighborhood. Fellow congregants later recalled seeing her that morning, smiling, exchanging greetings, participating in the service with her usual enthusiasm. After the service ended around 11:30 a.m., Pamela lingered briefly to chat with friends. She mentioned her plans to attend another church gathering in Connecticut later that afternoon, an event she had been looking forward to for weeks. Several people noted that she seemed in good spirits, showing no signs of distress or concern. At approximately 12:15 p.m., Pamela called her mother, Sonilda Ribiera. This call, brief and ordinary, would later take on enormous significance as her final known communication. During their conversation, Pamela confirmed she was heading home to change clothes before driving to Connecticut for the afternoon event. She told her mother she would call again once she arrived at the Connecticut church. She sounded normal, happy even, Sonilda would later tell investigators. She mentioned stopping at home first to get ready for the Connecticut service. That was it, nothing unusual, nothing to suggest anything was wrong. The timeline constructed by investigators indicates that Pamela likely returned to her apartment between 12:30 and 1 p.m. What happened after she entered that apartment remains largely unknown, pieced together only through subsequent investigation and evidence. By 3 p.m., organizers of the Connecticut church event began to wonder about Pamela's absence. She was known for her reliability. If she said she would be somewhere, she was there, often early. When 3:30 p.m. came and went with no sign of her and no message explaining her absence, people began to worry. One of the church members called Pamela's cell phone. The call went straight to voicemail. They tried again 30 minutes later with the same result. By 5 p.m., when the event was concluding and Pamela had still not appeared or called, the concern deepened. A friend from the Connecticut church called Sonilda around 5:30 p.m. to ask if she had heard from her daughter. This was the moment when worry transformed into alarm. Sonilda immediately tried calling Pamela's phone, again reaching only voicemail. She called several of Pamela's friends, none of whom had seen or heard from her since the morning service. By evening, Sonilda's maternal instinct told her something was seriously wrong. This wasn't a case of miscommunication or change plans. Pamela would never leave her mother wondering about her whereabouts. She would never miss a church commitment without explanation. Sonilda called the police to report her daughter missing that same evening. However, as is often the case with missing adults, the initial response was measured. Pamela was 26, had no known medical conditions, and had been missing for less than 24 hours. The officer who took the report explained that adults have the right to go missing if they choose, and suggested Pamela might simply need some time alone. But Sonilda knew her daughter. This wasn't a case of someone needing space. This was completely out of character. By Monday morning, when Pamela failed to show up for work and still wasn't answering her phone, Sonilda's concern had escalated to panic. She began organizing family and friends into search parties. They printed flyers with Pamela's photo, recent description, and contact information. They distributed these throughout the Bronx, focusing on areas Pamela frequented: her church, workplace, volunteer locations, and favorite cafes. They showed her picture to shopkeepers, bus drivers, and anyone who might have seen her. By Tuesday, March 4th, the family had created a social media campaign to spread awareness about Pamela's disappearance. Local community groups shared her information, and a few small news outlets picked up the story. The family contacted hospitals and shelters, desperately hoping for information. Sonilda returned to the police station multiple times, insisting that her daughter's disappearance be taken more seriously. She emphasized Pamela's reliability, her close family ties, and her recent decision to leave her relationship, a factor that should have raised immediate concerns given the statistics on domestic violence. As Wednesday turned to Thursday with no sign of Pamela, the family's fear grew increasingly unbearable. Every phone call, every knock at the door brought a surge of hope followed by crushing disappointment. Every hour that passed decreased the likelihood of finding Pamela safe. What would you do if someone you loved suddenly disappeared? Share your thoughts below. Would you trust the system to find them, or would you take matters into your own hands like Pamela's family did? Thursday, March 6, 2025, marked the fourth day of Pamela's disappearance. While her family continued their desperate search throughout the Bronx, events were unfolding 10 miles north in Yonkers that would finally provide answers, though not the ones they had been praying for. At 9:47 a.m., a highway maintenance worker spotted something unusual along the Saw Mill River Parkway. A large red suitcase partially hidden in the vegetation near the creek that runs alongside the road. The location was strategic, accessible enough for quick disposal, but secluded enough to delay discovery. The worker immediately notified authorities. Yonkers Police Department officers arrived within minutes, establishing a perimeter around the area. When they approached the suitcase, they found it partially unzipped. Inside was the body of a young woman. Emergency medical services personnel arrived quickly, but could only confirm what was already apparent. The woman was deceased. Detective Maria Ramirez took lead on the scene, overseeing the meticulous process of evidence collection. The area was photographed extensively before anything was moved. The suitcase itself was carefully examined for fingerprints, fibers, and other trace evidence. The surrounding ground was searched for footprints, tire tracks, and any discarded items that might connect to the crime. "We treat every inch of a scene like this as potentially crucial," Detective Ramirez later explained. "Something as small as a cigarette, or receipt could break a case wide open." The body showed no immediate signs of gunshot wounds or stabbing. The medical examiner would later determine that the cause of death was asphyxiation. The victim had no identification on her person, but her description matched that of several recent missing persons reports, including Pamela Alcantara's. By noon, investigators had expanded their search area to include a half-mile radius around the discovery site. They collected security camera footage from nearby businesses and interviewed employees who might have witnessed unusual activity in the preceding days. The breakthrough came from technology that has revolutionized modern investigations: automated license plate readers. These devices, mounted on police vehicles and fixed locations throughout the region, capture images of license plates and record the time and location of each reading. Investigators requested data from all license plate readers in the vicinity of the Saw Mill River Parkway between March 2nd and March 6th. Among thousands of readings, one stood out. A vehicle registered to Junior Perez Diaz had been recorded near the discovery site at 2:13 a.m. on March 5th, an unusual time for anyone to be in that specific location. This digital evidence provided investigators with their first solid lead. They immediately began tracking Perez Diaz's movements through additional license plate reader data, creating a timeline of his vehicle's locations in the days following Pamela's disappearance. Simultaneously, detectives obtained security footage from businesses near the apartment Pamela shared with Perez Diaz. One camera, positioned across the street from their building, captured crucial footage on the evening of March 4th. Perez Diaz struggling to load a large red suitcase into the trunk of his car around 11:45 p.m. The investigation now moved at remarkable speed. Within hours, detectives had obtained search warrants for the apartment and Perez Diaz's vehicle. The apartment search revealed signs of recent cleaning, bleach residue in the bathroom and bedroom, newly washed linens, and a receipt for cleaning supplies purchased on March 3rd. Forensic technicians used luminol, a chemical that reacts with even trace amounts of blood, throughout the apartment. Despite the cleaning efforts, the luminol revealed blood evidence in the bedroom and bathroom that had been invisible to the naked eye. Samples were collected for DNA analysis. The vehicle search yielded additional evidence, fibers matching the red suitcase in the trunk, and despite thorough cleaning, trace blood evidence that would later match Pamela's DNA profile. By Thursday afternoon, investigators had gathered enough evidence to bring Perez Diaz in for questioning. He arrived at the police station voluntarily, but became increasingly agitated as the interview progressed. When confronted with the license plate reader data and security footage, his story began to change multiple times. Initially, he claimed Pamela had left on her own and he hadn't seen her since Sunday. When shown the footage of him loading the suitcase, he claimed it contained only clothes. As detectives presented more evidence, his explanations became increasingly implausible. After 4 hours of questioning, detectives had enough evidence to place Perez Diaz under arrest. The formal identification of the body was still pending, but investigators were confident they had found Pamela Alcantara and apprehended her killer. The speed of this investigation, moving from discovery to arrest in less than 12 hours, demonstrates how modern investigative techniques, when properly applied, can quickly build an overwhelming case. License plate readers, security cameras, forensic technology, and traditional detective work combined to cut through deception and reveal the truth. For Pamela's family, still distributing flyers and searching the Bronx, the news came as both confirmation of their worst fears and the first step toward justice. Their 4-day nightmare of uncertainty had ended, but a longer journey through grief and the legal system was just beginning.
Perro, un animal, un monstruo, que solo Dios y yo sabemos, maldito monstruo, monstruo.
They called him a monster, the devil, and a dog. The emotional scene Friday night outside the 4-6 precinct in the Bronx, as Junior Perez Diaz was charged with the kidnapping and murder of his ex-girlfriend.
Justicia para Pamela! Justicia para Pamela! Justicia para Pamela! Justicia para Pamela!
Meanwhile, the cries for justice for Pamela Alcantara echoed just a few blocks away on Morris Avenue. The victim's family gathering for a prayer vigil outside the apartment building where she last lived with Perez Diaz.
Junior Perez was charged, and so our prayers have been answered. Our prayers have been answered.
Ninguna madre sufra.
I don't want no mother to suffer what I'm living through today.
Her mother rushing to New York from the Dominican Republic, trying in vain to find her. Alcantara was last seen FaceTiming her while entering her elevator Sunday morning, but the devout Christian never made it to church.
She was afraid to say, I'm getting hurt.
The victim's aunt believes Alcantara suffered in silence from her abuser, but was set to move out.
She never complaining about it. She was so quiet. She hid it inside.
Si no le ponemos un paro, ella no va a ser una, van a seguir haciendo más niñas.
If they don't put a stop to this, it's not only going to be my daughter that's going to die because of domestic violence, but many others
On
will.
Friday, March 7th, 2025, just one day after the discovery of Pamela's body, Junior Perez Diaz was formally charged with murder, manslaughter, and kidnapping. The 46-year-old sat expressionless as officers processed him through the system, fingerprinting, photographing, and collecting DNA samples that would further connect him to the evidence found in the apartment and vehicle. The Bronx District Attorney's Office moved with unusual speed to file charges, citing the strength of the evidence and concerns about potential flight risk. The charging documents outlined a case built on physical evidence, digital tracking, and the suspicious timing of Perez Diaz's activities following Pamela's disappearance. We have rarely seen a case with such overwhelming evidence assembled so quickly, noted District Attorney Marcuschan during a brief press conference. The combination of modern technology and traditional police work has given us a solid foundation to seek justice for Pamela Alcantara. The murder charge, the most serious of the three, carried a potential sentence of 25 years to life in New York State. The additional charges of manslaughter and kidnapping were filed to address different aspects of the crime and to ensure that even if one charge faced challenges in court, others would remain viable. By late afternoon on March 7th, Perez Diaz appeared for his arraignment at the Bronx County Criminal Court. The small courtroom was packed with journalists, members of the public, and, sitting in the front row, Pamela's family, including her mother, Sunilda Ribiera. Sunilda sat rigid throughout the proceeding, her eyes fixed on Perez Diaz as he entered in handcuffs. Friends flanked her on either side, occasionally squeezing her hand or placing an arm around her shoulders. Her face revealed the complex emotions of the moment: grief, anger, exhaustion, and a fierce determination to see the process through. Judge Eleanor Ramirez presided over the arraignment, reading the charges in a clear, measured voice that echoed through the hushed courtroom. When asked how he pleaded, Perez Diaz responded with two quiet words: not guilty. This standard plea, expected at this early stage of proceedings, nevertheless sent a visible ripple of emotion through Pamela's family. Sunilda closed her eyes briefly, her composure cracking for just a moment before she straightened her shoulders and continued watching. The prosecution requested that Perez Diaz be held without bail, citing the severity of the charges, the strength of the evidence, and concerns that he might flee to avoid prosecution. The defense attorney, a public defender assigned to the case just hours earlier, argued briefly for reasonable bail, noting his client's long-term residence in the community. After considering both arguments, Judge Ramirez denied bail, ordering Perez Diaz to remain in custody until trial. She then scheduled a series of pre-trial proceedings, including a discovery hearing for April 18, 2025, where prosecutors would be required to share all evidence with the defense, a motion hearing for May 22, 2025, where the defense could challenge the admissibility of certain evidence, a final pre-trial conference for June 16, 2025, to address any remaining issues before trial. The actual trial date has not yet been set, but is expected to be scheduled during the June 16 conference. Prosecutors have estimated the trial itself could last 2 to 3 weeks once it begins, likely in late summer 2025. As Perez Diaz was led from the courtroom, Sunilda stood, supported by family members. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by reporters, she spoke briefly about her daughter. "My Pamela was light and love," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. She helped others escape violence, and now she cannot help herself. But I am here. I will be her voice now. I will be here every day until there is justice. The case immediately drew attention from domestic violence advocacy groups, who pointed to Pamela's murder as a tragic example of the dangers faced by those attempting to leave abusive relationships. Several organizations announced plans to attend all future court proceedings in solidarity with the family. As of today, May 26, 2025, the case remains in the pretrial phase. The defense has filed several motions to suppress evidence, particularly the license plate reader data, arguing it was obtained without proper warrants. The prosecution has countered that the data was collected from public roadways where no expectation of privacy exists. Judge Ramirez is expected to rule on these motions during the May 22 hearing, which concluded just 4 days ago with the judge taking the arguments under advisement. The June 16 pretrial conference, now just 3 weeks away, will likely determine when Pamela's family will finally see the case go to trial. For now, they wait, attending every hearing and maintaining a dignified presence in the courtroom as the legal process unfolds. News of Pamela's murder and the arrest of Junior Perez Diaz spread rapidly through the Bronx. The community that had helped search for her now gathered to mourn her loss and support her family. Makeshift memorials appeared outside her apartment building and the church she attended, with flowers, candles, and handwritten notes from those whose lives she had touched. "The Bronx is a place where people look out for each other," said Pastor Miguel Fuentes of Pamela's church. "When one of us is hurt, we all feel it. When one of us is taken, we all stand together." Within 24 hours of the arrest, a neighbor who had known Pamela since childhood created a GoFundMe campaign with a specific purpose: to help repatriate Pamela's body to the Dominican Republic. Her mother wished to reunite Pamela with her younger sister in their ancestral homeland, giving the family a chance to say goodbye together. The campaign's initial goal was $15,000 to cover transportation costs and funeral arrangements. Within 3 days, donations had surpassed $23,000, coming from hundreds of individuals across New York City and beyond. Many donors included personal messages about how Pamela had helped them or their loved ones through her volunteer work. "She sat with my mother in the hospital when I couldn't be there," wrote one donor. "I never forgot that kindness. May she rest in peace." Local media coverage was extensive, with the major New York outlets following the case closely. Several journalists focused on the domestic violence aspect of the story, using Pamela's tragedy as a springboard to discuss the broader issue of intimate partner homicide. Statistics about the dangers of leaving abusive relationships were highlighted, along with resources for those in similar situations. The public response went beyond financial support and media attention. Community organizations mobilized to provide practical assistance to Pamela's family. A local restaurant delivered meals to their home. Volunteers helped manage the logistics of funeral arrangements. Therapy services were offered pro bono to family members struggling with grief and trauma. Perhaps most poignantly, the domestic violence shelter where Pamela had volunteered held a remembrance ceremony. Women whom Pamela had helped shared stories about her compassion and dedication. Many expressed a painful irony that someone who had worked so hard to protect others from violence had ultimately become a victim herself. She taught us how to recognize warning signs in others, said one shelter resident. But sometimes it's hardest to see those same signs in your own life. The shelter announced plans to create a permanent memorial to Pamela, a small garden where survivors could find peace and reflection. They also established, as the community rallied around Pamela's memory, her story began to transcend the boundaries of the Bronx. National news outlets picked up the case, focusing on both the tragic circumstances and the remarkable community response. What might have been a local tragedy became a catalyst for wider conversations about domestic violence, community support systems, and the importance of recognizing warning signs before violence escalates. For the Bronx community, Pamela's death represented not just the loss of a beloved member, but a call to action, to watch out for one another more vigilantly, and to ensure that her work helping others would continue even after her life had ended.
The family and friends, her church family here gathering in front of her apartment building. This is where she lived, and this is where they last saw her alive. I'm going to step out of the way here so you can take a live look of what's happening. They are holding a prayer vigil for the young 26-year-old. Here you can see the balloons, holding candles. Again, she was last seen getting onto the elevator of her apartment building, going up to her apartment, and that's the last time they saw her alive. Many people here that I spoke to describe her as a beautiful soul. She was a chaplain. Her church family here comforting her mother and her loved ones. Police say...
As of today, May 27, 2025, Junior Perez Diaz remains in custody awaiting his next court appearance on June 16th. The legal process moves forward methodically, with prosecutors building their case and defense attorneys preparing their strategy. For Pamela's family, each court date brings both pain and purpose. Difficult reminders of their loss coupled with determination to see justice served. The trial, when it eventually begins, will likely draw significant media attention. But regardless of its outcome, Pamela's impact extends far beyond the courtroom. In the months since her death, her story has become a powerful catalyst for change in how communities understand and respond to domestic violence. The shelter where Pamela volunteered has seen a 40% increase in calls from women seeking help to leave dangerous relationships. Many specifically mention hearing Pamela's story as their motivation to reach out before it's too late. The garden created in her memory provides a peaceful space for reflection, while the scholarship in her name has already helped 3 survivors begin college courses. Local churches and community centers have implemented domestic violence awareness programs, educating members about warning signs and available resources. Several have established protocols for supporting members who may be in dangerous relationships, creating networks of safe houses and transportation assistance. Perhaps most significantly, Pamela's mother, Senilda, has emerged as a powerful advocate. Though initially private in her grief, she has begun speaking at community events, sharing her daughter's story and urging families to stay vigilant about the relationships of their loved ones. Her quiet strength and unwavering commitment to preventing similar tragedies have transformed personal loss into public purpose. "My daughter's hands helped many women find safety," Senilda told a recent gathering. Now her story is doing the same. This is how she continues to live, in every person who finds courage to leave, in every family that intervenes before violence occurs. Pamela Alcantara was more than the tragic circumstances of her death. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a dedicated community servant. She was someone who recognized suffering in others and worked to alleviate it. She was a young woman with dreams and potential that will never be fully realized. As her case proceeds through the justice system, the most meaningful tribute to Pamela's memory isn't found in courtroom verdicts, but in lives saved through the awareness her story has created. In this way, Her compassion continues to protect others. Her kindness continues to offer hope. And her spirit continues to inspire change, ensuring that while her life was cut short, her impact remains immeasurable. If this story has impacted you, please consider supporting domestic violence awareness and prevention efforts in your community. Like, subscribe, and share this video to spread awareness. Together, we can work toward a world where promising young lives like Pamela's are not cut short by preventable violence. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Dark Trace Crime Stories. Until next time, stay safe and stay vigilant.